jump into our closing plenary and close the night off, and then we're going to get into networking. So stick around with us. We'll keep the conversation going. Matt Grocoff, founding principal of Thrive Collaborative, creating life-enhancing grid interactive buildings that harvest their own energy, water, create zero waste, and are beautiful and restorative. He is a developer and currently creating the Veridian at County Farm, targeting net zero mixed income neighborhood, going for the Living Community Challenge, pedal certification. And he's letting me make the big announcement that they have recently been approved by the Ann Arbor Planning Commission to start building, right, to really build that dream, and they're still taking investors, so I'll post a link to that. But Matt, with that, please take it away.
Yeah. All right, guys. First, thank you so much, and thanks everybody for sticking around. I just want to start by saying that our conventional development model is deeply, deeply flawed. It hides all the costs of the negative impacts from which developers profit. So we all end up paying the price for these weakened social and ecological systems. But tonight, I really want to talk about a future that doesn't suck. So there's this deeply held myth that meeting our climate targets, our transition to clean energy, creating a socially just society, that somehow this is going to cause our modern way of life to suffer. But these 2050 carbon neutrality goals that we have, way off in 2050, are really simply a lack of imagination to achieve what's already possible. Right? It's a failure to understand the true beauty of what this transition is really about. So I'm here to tell you today, it's going to be freaking gorgeous. So, as we gather here tonight, we're in the midst of two really profound crises. But the way we respond as we recover from the crisis of this global pandemic, that's going to determine the severity of the impacts of the climate crisis. And if we fail, we'll be condemning our ancestors to an uninhabitable world by every measure. Now, last year, I had the extraordinary privilege to be in front of the Swedish parliament where Greta Thunberg started her climate strike for the first global school strike for climate, and got to spend some time with some of the students, the original 10 students who were there. And what Greta said back then to the world was, that hope and pep talking is not the answer. And instead of looking for hope, we should look for action. And when you act, then and only then, hope will come. So what she was really saying was hope is something that you earn. These pledges,
is fully charged.
These pledges, these resolutions, our goals, they're all useless to a child who's inside of a burning building. Now, a few years ago, I took my daughters out of school early to watch the SpaceX launch of the Falcon Heavy rocket with the Tesla Roadster and the Starman as its cargo. And when the camera turned around, for the first time ever, my 3-year-old daughter, Dahlia, got to see planet Earth live on her TV screen. And she looked up and she just screamed with excitement. She says, "That's where we live." And I replied, "Yeah, that's where everyone lives." And she just looked up to me with her sweet little brown eyes and she says, "Yeah, we share it." And a few months later, our older daughter, Jane, who was 9 years old at the time, her teacher asked her class what they wished their superhero powers could be. And everyone gave the typical examples: flying, lightning, invisibility. And this is what Jane said: "To snap my fingers and climate change is over." Why? Because it's hard to do by yourself. This is the generational trauma that we're inflicting on our descendants. But let me tell you a story about where my daughters are now growing up. In 2006, my wife bought this house that was now 120 years old in the historic Old West Side district of Ann Arbor. And this is what it looked like the day that we moved in, complete with the asbestos siding and lead paint and all the other great things that come up with a 100-year-old house. But we insulated the home, we added geothermal heating and cooling, and then we removed the gas line, and we converted the home to 100% all electric. And by 2014, after adding solar, we became one of the world's first buildings to achieve Living Building Challenge Energy Pedal certification. And because of that, we got all kinds of media attention. I was called the Proven Zero Energy Master. USA Today called it one of the best green homes in America. The Atlantic called it sustainable perfection. It's a beautiful term, sustainable perfection. But there really is no sustainable building because all of life depends on underlying networks that are beneficial to each other. So we've got to find a way to scale living buildings and to create an entire world of living communities. Now, a healthy development model would be to create the conditions that are conducive to life in the same way that nature does. So the Thrive Collaborative is using the framework of the Living Community Challenge to create Veridian at County Farm. And we're developing what is likely to be the world's first Living Community Challenge compliant neighborhood master plan, which is considered to be the world's most rigorous green building standard. We're really playing for the end game. The property here is located in Ann Arbor, right near the University of Michigan. It's adjacent to a 130-acre park with tree-lined trails. And we're turning a property that used to incarcerate troubled youth into a living community. So we really need to take a look at how we can protect the last remaining wild places, stop building in those places, and rebuild only in the places that we've already degraded, and then invite life back into those places that we've already built, into the existing built environment, and restore that environment. Now, the first peoples to call Washtenaw County home, where Ann Arbor is based, and the property is located, were the Potawatomi and the Ojibwe. And in fact, the word Washtenaw comes from the Ojibwe word Washtenaw, which I think means over there, downriver. And in 1834, the county purchased the land from the first European owner of the property, and it became the home of the Washtenaw County Poor Farm, which it operated as that for about 100 years. And in the 1960s, the county built a youth prison on the property, which was finally shut down in 2011, and then they demolished the building in 2013. And in 2018, the Washtenaw County Board of Commissioners voted unanimously for Avalon Housing and Thrive Collaborative to develop Veridian at County Farm. And the neighborhood itself is targeting to be a mixed income, 100% all electric development, powered with solar, with no combustion appliances of any kind. Front porches face greenways to connect people into the miles of wooded trail into County Farm Park. The landscaping is viewed as a means of reviving ecosystems. And rather than designing to the apocalyptic standard of stormwater, we treat rainwater as an asset through bioswales, permeable surfaces, rainwater harvesting. And much of the land is reserved for food production, for urban agriculture, with streets lined with fruit trees, edible plant gardens, community gardens, garden tool share sheds, greenhouses. We've been exploring creating root cellars for harvest storage. And then we're rescuing and restoring a historic barn from nearby Ann Arbor, from the Heber farm. And we're going to use that as a multi-purpose community space for indoor farmers markets, cider pressings, movies, nightly yoga, art classes. It's really limited only by the imagination and the creativity of the neighbors who are going to live there. And we're also creating a full-service farm stop grocery store called the Honey Locust Farm Stop, which will provide local food from local farmers year-round. And the neighborhood is designed to a humane scale, meant to be accessible to people of all ages and all abilities. There's going to be a variety of market rate housing types, ranging from the small 350 square foot nest flats all the way up to 2,300 square foot village homes. And then Avalon Housing, our nonprofit collaborator, is going to be developing 50 units of affordable supportive housing, where some of those residents will have recently experienced homelessness. And to make bike ownership easy, It's easier than owning a car. In fact, we're going to have a bike barn for year-round bike maintenance and repair with all the tools and everything else you'll need available. We'll have an EV bike share program and cargo bikes that you can take rather than your car. We'll have planned car charging and car sharing programs as well, abundant throughout the community. And then we're going to be targeting zero waste by creating a living materials plan. And we'll have compulsory composting and really looking for innovative ways to get that done after the residents move in. And to hit our net zero energy targets, we plan to install solar on every rooftop of the market rate homes. We'll put EV chargers in most of the homes and in the public areas. Now, think about this. When you ask about the cost of what this would do, the average monthly household spending on gas and electric is $183 throughout the US. The average monthly household spending on gasoline for cars is $242. It's over $2,000 a year, right? But it's only $151 a month added onto a mortgage payment to include 16 kilowatts of installed solar into the price of the home by adding that into the mortgage. And the price is fixed for 30 years. It never goes up. So let's look at this. This is just to review this. This is $151 for net zero energy versus the norm of $425. So you've got a cost reduction of $274 a month for clean energy. And you can't dispute these numbers. So no, this revolution is not coming sometime soon because it's already here. And the bonus is that the developer avoids the cost of installing this gas infrastructure into the neighborhood. So now we've got the potential to install 1.4 megawatts of solar into this neighborhood. So we're talking about, nearly 2 megawatt hours of production on the rooftops alone. We plan to do some storage, battery storage, and resilience. And Avalon Housing has made their community building into a living building challenge affordable housing pilot project. So if you take all of this rooftop solar in the neighborhood, you could fill the bowl and cover the field and then some of the Michigan Stadium football. But we've got barriers to putting more solar into the neighborhood because of the multifamily housing. And even if there were no regulatory barriers in this neighborhood, simply blanketing rooftops all over cities across America with privately owned solar is not the solution, right? We need to find ways to use neighborhood distributed solar as a grid asset rather than as a grid liability. So by putting up this much solar, you're actually creating a problem for the grid. So we're working with our utility company, with the University of Michigan, with Ann Arbor 2030, with A20, the city, the county, and Next Energy and Avalon Housing to create a pilot to figure out how do we create a grid interactive community that's beneficial. Now, we don't know if humanity is going to transition fast enough to avoid the catastrophic consequences of climate crisis. We really can't predict the future, but we can choose to create a living future. And we damn well better start now. So your work tonight and going forward is the action that will earn us hope. So I'll close tonight with one of my favorite poems from my favorite poet and writer, Wendell Berry. It's called The Peace of Wild Things. When despair for the world grows in me, and I wake in the night at the least sound in fear of what my life and my children's lives may be, I go and I lie down where the wood drake rests in his beauty on the water, and the great heron feeds. And I come into the peace of wild things who do not tax their lives with forethought of grief. I come into the presence of still water, and I feel above me the day-blind stars waiting for their light. And for a time, I rest in the grace of the world, and I am free.
Matt, thank you so much. I think we were just listening to that and reflecting, and so there was a little bit of a silent second there. But
I'm sure everybody was applauding wildly at that point, in their eyes. I
yeah,
wish I could see all of your faces. I really do. Um,
yeah. Well, Matt, I really appreciate you joining us. Can you stick around for a little bit of Q&A dialogue and questions?
Absolutely.
And I did want to let everyone know that actually the job fair, for those of you who are interested in that and transitioning there, has opened up a little bit early. So I posted the information to that in the chat, and there's some handouts there as well. So let me start taking a look at the questions. Yeah, I guess one of the questions is where the heck can people go to find out more about what you're up to and follow you?
Just go camp out and wait at the property and watch things happen. No, the easiest thing to do is go to veridian@countyfarm.com, and you can find me on and the project Veridian at County Farm on Twitter and Instagram, LinkedIn, all those places. But veridian@countyfarm.com is the best place to go. And for information about the crowdfund that we're doing as well through Local Stakes, which closes 2 weeks from tomorrow, right after the election. So it's really a way that we can allow everybody to support the mission and then share in the benefits in a way that's very unconventional for a typical development to do. We kind of reimagined, like we thought to ourselves, what if every developer was required to get at least a small portion of their funding from the neighbors where your project is being built and from people in other places that support the mission of what you're doing, instead of just faceless and nameless investors and developers that may never even visit the site where they're developing, and again, leaving all the degraded ecosystems and social systems to the community and outsourcing those externalities.
So somebody wants to know specifically what's your role within this project or roles?
Many roles. So I'm the founder of the Thrive Collaborative, and we're the developers of this project. And so we're collaborating with Avalon Housing, and so we're developing two parcels together as one neighborhood.
Another question that came in was great comparison of that 425 to 151 on the mortgage. Was that 30 years?
That would be a 30-year mortgage, yes, and that does include incentives. But those are real numbers. Those are today's dollars. They're not future dollars. They're not any kind of special discounts or anything like that. It's real numbers.
Was it like utility incentives, the tax credits, kind of all bundled together?
Nope, just the tax credits. I just assumed a 25% tax credit.
Okay, so you didn't even assume any potential utility programs or anything like that that might come along.
Nope. And I didn't even do any kind of calculation of what the value of that money would be in the future, or the increase in utility costs not being fixed. Just those flat numbers from day one, you get a cost reduction. And that's where we are. That's the reality right now, that wind, solar is the cheapest form of energy on the planet right now. In fact, there were some points in some markets where people were actually paying to get rid of fuel oils, because there was just such a glut that you had to pay to get rid of it. So there was a negative value to that fuel.
Yeah, that makes sense. Are there any types of funding besides the crowdfunding that you're doing?
Yes. Yes, we have. So the crowdfunding is actually just a small portion of the raise, and again, it's our larger investors all agreed. We told them that we'd like to set aside a small amount, up to a few $100,000 or so, to allow everybody to invest and show their support for the project in this way and be able to share in the benefit. Just as another lever that we can use for this high profile project to say, let's start exploring other ways to fund these things. So it's not a significant part of our funding, but it's something that's very important to us to allow others to share in that. And the terms are similar to what somebody who would be investing, $500,000 or more would be getting.
How are you, specifically assisting with what we call, low-income housing, supportive, homeless? Is there funding involved in that? Any more details?
Yeah, so what we did was with our partnership with Avalon Housing. Avalon Housing has been doing this for over 20 years, and they're able to provide those most in need in the community, the first and deepest need to address. And with economic mobility, the single best indicator is your zip code. Where do you live? And so there's a lot of evidence now that to move people out of poverty is to live in a mixed income neighborhood. And there's very few in the country that are doing this, and people are just now starting to find ways to do this. In New York, they had a disastrous process where they put luxury housing with affordable housing, and they had a door in the back for the poor people to go into, which was dubbed the poor door. So by allowing, so Avalon Housing has their own funding mechanisms. They're completely funded separate than the market rate homes. So we each have to go through those conventional processes that exist today. And they're funded through low-income housing tax credits, and those would be covenanted for 99 years as affordable housing, and they would stay on as to provide supportive housing. So they provide support for the residents that live there in perpetuity.
So you clearly stated a project that didn't work out so well, but are there any other that you know of that are either underway or that inspired you that are kind of similar to this in the country or world at all?
Yeah, there's a lot. All of these elements, you can find examples of them in different places around the world. You can find neighborhoods that are incorporating urban agriculture. You can find neighborhoods that are net zero energy. You can find a handful of mixed income neighborhoods, and where some market rate homes are being mixed with deeply supportive and affordable housing. This is really unique in that we're really not accepting any barriers at all. We're trying to achieve and leverage this, because at the end of the day, we've got this extraordinary piece of property in a beautiful city, in a really tight housing market where there's a housing shortage. So we can leverage that opportunity to do something more, to really take that extra time by leveraging a fantastic conventional real estate deal and turning it into something like a living community. So there's a lot of things that inspired everything from old Chautauqua villages to pocket neighborhoods to all of these things that have these different elements. And we'll learn more going forward, but the fundamentals of this should be a model that other people can do. I will say that the greatest risk of this project is that it will be wildly successful and that no other developer will be able to replicate it, which is why we're using the framework of the Living Community Challenge and creating this document of this Living Community Challenge master plan, because then everyone will be able to see that master plan, and we'll be able to use that as an educational tool and have that as the playbook for everyone else, for planning commissions, for cities, for developers.
Sorry, I'm on mute. I wonder to what degree, from a replication standpoint, is it that there was already these pre-existing conditions where you are that may or may not exist elsewhere? I mean, does that play a huge role, or is that, pretty just, I mean, or were there still a lot of barriers?
There's barriers everywhere. I mean, from Copenhagen to Oklahoma City to Ann Arbor. Everyone has these institutional barriers, whether it's conventional global financing mechanisms, whether it's setbacks and rights of way that we give to things like feces and fossil fuels, right? We've got to have 40-foot setbacks for the sewer pipes and the massive fire trucks and garbage trucks. So all of these things had to be this elegant dance. But the way we were able to solve a lot of those people was getting everybody in the same room and work through a deeply collaborative process. So when we did hit a barrier and someone said, oh, we need this setback from here, or we need this right of way for this utility pipe or something, we said, yeah, we can do all those things. We can still get your fire truck and your trash truck in there, but then we're going to have to cut down these Baroque trees. And then when everyone is in the same room from the city, we can say, okay, raise your hand if you favor cutting down the Baroque trees. Now it's cheap enough for us to do it as a developer to tear down those trees. In many cases, there's properties that are more valuable to the developer if they had 0 trees on them. Everyone in that room knows that these are valuable. And so then all of a sudden we can find ways to work together and collaborate and still meet all of the requirements and get the fire trucks in and get the trash trucks in. But you find creative ways to do that by creating permeable grass paved fire lanes, which hopefully never get used, but can hold a fire truck if you need it. Creating living materials plans where you separate the composting and the recycling, and you have them in different places, so the trucks are actually moving in different places, and you can have tighter routes for them, and distributed pickup, so you don't have dumpsters throughout the community. So getting really creative and innovative with people in city staffs, and any community could do that. The code here is not much different than it is in other places.
Yeah, and so I just want to I want to start inviting other speakers or presenters of ours, panelists. If you want to jump in, activate your camera, dive into the conversation. For those of you who are attendees, please raise your hand. I can unmute you, and you can ask a question verbally if you'd like. If you want to jump into this conversation, I heard you say got a laugh out of it, from fossil fuels to feces, and it almost seemed like perfect for our Halloween horror show. And it almost seems like a great political ad of what people might be. This is what they're investing in: fossil fuels to feces, and not the future. It just, I love that.
Is alliteration wonderful?
Yeah. Some other questions is, how transparent are you going to be is kind of, I think, the bulk of this question. I mean, how much are you going to open up any details or documents on, costs involved and everything that you're doing?
Yeah, well, we've been transparent and we'll continue to be. And by the end, we'll have, we'll be sharing our spreadsheets, our profits, because again, our goal is we will replicate this ourselves, no doubt. But like we said about the individual buildings, there is no such thing as a sustainable neighborhood. If all neighborhoods aren't sustainable, then this one won't be either. So we've got to get other developers to be doing this. And we're already having an impact. There's a neighborhood here in Ann Arbor that came up a bit after ours, a piece of property where city staff was able to convince them to go all electric. And if we're not going all electric, we're adding to the list of things we need to retrofit in the next 5 years. In fact, some of these buildings will be so expensive to build with this gas infrastructure that the expense of retrofitting them will make them stranded assets, because they'll be less valuable than other buildings that are all electric. So we're already having an impact on other developers, and we're seeing things happen. And we're getting calls from around the country from people and saying, so wait, tell me more about Living Community Challenge. What is that? How hard is it to do? And the exciting thing is none of this is rocket science. It's not that hard. Really, there's not a ton of individual innovation in this project. What the innovation is the collaboration to bring it all together and thread the needle of the existing financial and regulatory frameworks that we have. Some of our planning partners, I know you guys are out there, don't be shy. Feel free to jump into the conversation. John, I think I saw some questions from you. If you just want to dive right in and ask it, please do so. Kind of as we're waiting for that, Matt, what do you say to folks who might say, well, we've got all this existing building stock and you're kind of putting your energy into new? I mean, what's kind of your response to that? Well, there's no question. Just in homes alone, we've got 120 million homes we need to retrofit. So that has to be done. There's no question. But at the same time, there's also a housing shortage. So the challenge is that everything going forward that's new should be built to this net zero energy standard. It should be all electric. If it's not all electric, we're never going to meet our goals. Then, again, as I said before, you're just moving that building into the retrofit column. the day it's occupied. It's crazy. It's madness. So all new construction should be built to the standard from now on, and we're going to prove that possible. My house is a living example of that already. My house, it's been almost 10 years since we electrified this house. Yeah, but the existing building stock, we absolutely need to work on that as well. And we have one client looking for a property to renovate to do a net zero home as well.
I know Living Building Challenge requires getting involved to some degree, I believe, in advocacy or policy. And we've got our Michigan Building Code coming up, I believe, changing, next year, or starting that process. Are you going to be involved at all in trying to ensure, like what you said, like right out of the gate, how do we get our new homes right?
Yeah, no, I'll be involved to the extent that we're constantly feeding information and advocating on phone calls and things for what's possible. And the exciting thing is that we're able to go to planning commissions and saying, here it is, here's an example. Now you can use this when you go and advocate. So by opening up our books, by showing everybody what these numbers are, we're really trying to accelerate this transformation. And yeah, you're right. So Living Building Challenge, Living Community Challenge has beauty, and you're intended to inspire and educate, is one of the imperatives. So through websites, through signage, through tours, open house days, all of these things going forward. And then part of the work that we're doing with the utility company and researchers at the University of Michigan, we're going to be able to provide data for them as well, down to the millisecond and where the electrons are flowing.
John, did you have any questions? I saw you appear and then disappear again.
Yeah, I just had two questions. I think you answered the first one, that you're going into this with the idea of trying to create a model that could be replicated in other places. That's the gist I get. And then my second question is, outside of the crowdfunding, are you tapping into the fairly mainstream sources of capital to finance this project?
Yeah, and that's how, we're still going through the conventional, financial models. We have a conventional pro forma that all has to happen in order to make any project viable. What we're doing differently is the organizations and the individuals that we're seeking out. We want them to really align with our mission. So we haven't had a lot of conversations with conventional banks that have no stated climate mission. Yes, that's so there's a whole new world opening up, and really it's been laid bare and really been excited by the COVID crisis. I mean, since March, all of a sudden you're starting to hear about impact investing, everything from ESGs, environmental and social governance, to SDGs, sustainable development goals, impact investing. So all these things become very popular mechanisms that people are tapping into.
But you're not looking for like foundations or like one-off funding for this.
Well, interesting you say that. We were not looking for foundations, but some came to us. So there are foundations who are exploring, rather than donating money to communities, foundations now are looking for investment opportunities that have impact. So we're on some of their books to do that, and it's really exciting to think that these community foundations and other foundations are looking for opportunities. How can they make an impact and have that money returned? So it's great.
Hey, there's some of our speakers and planning partners jumping in. Thanks jumping in, guys, for the conversation. And again, for those of you who want to head over to the job fair, that I did post that link in there. If any of you want to head over to that, I know they're going on now, being led by Michael Clement, one of our other planning partners. So thanks for jumping in.
Friends on here. Hi, friends.
Oh yeah, I haven't seen Chris for a while, so I had to wait for Chris and Larry. Larry was always a good promoter. I told a couple of his stories that he told me last night. in my family. So you have wonderful stories about, what was the country singer you were going to talk about? Anyway, sorry, don't mean to digress.
Yeah, the one thing you learn, David, is you never tell somebody something that you can't repeat. You know, it's like, I have this great joke, but I can't tell you. So you only want to
Was it
say
Tammy
things
Wynette that you went to the house with 15 rooms and she invited you?
Yeah, we were on a tour of Nashville, and the first house we stopped at was Tammy Wynette's house. And it's 18,000 square feet, 17 bedrooms, 13 bathrooms. And we pull up to the gate, and husband, George Ritchie, is cutting the grass on a tractor, and he comes over. And I thought he's going to pull out a gun and say, get the heck off my property. And instead he says, what you all doing? And I said, well, we came for coffee. He says, oh, would you like to come in? He said, sure. And there were only 4 of us on the tour and one bus driver who was a country music singer. And I said, what, is Tammy on tour? He says, no, she's home. Tammy, I'm inviting some guests in. And he took us over the house, took a picture of them in their living room, and it was nice to be. And she was complaining that it was near Christmas and her kids were all coming home for Christmas, and how crowded the house gets when all the kids are home. You know, 18,000 square foot home, and it's too crowded. And of course, I'm not saying anything because she's being incredibly nice. You know, she stood by her man, all 5 of them.
Larry, she's watching tonight.
Maybe Tammy's dead, I believe. So, but yeah, I won't say anything bad because I thought that was an incredible moment of generosity, you know, to take us into their house. And I didn't tell you this part of it, David. One of the people on the tour was my coworker. The other was a couple from Kentucky on their honeymoon. Now, I don't know a huge amount about their honeymoon, except they were staying at a Super 8. So, I mean, I may be reading a little bit much into that. My guess is they weren't the most affluent of couples staying at a Super 8 on their honeymoon. And I thought, as much as that was a treat for me, imagine how much that was a treat for them. You know, for this couple who probably doesn't get the opportunity very often to be able to be in Tammy Wynette's house. I think that's an incredible story to be able to tell about your honeymoon. So,
okay, I know. So Larry's got wonderful stories. So Matt, they have already some homes on the site to go tour? I can't get to Ann Arbor right now.
Wait, I can't quite make out what you're saying.
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay, hold on.
He's saying, when are you, well, I already know the answer to this, but when are you breaking ground?
Hopefully this spring, if all goes well.
Okay, so some homes you can go into and, okay. Yeah, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay.
is there a percentage, Matt, is there a percentage of homes you need to fill to make it successful? I mean, does it have to be 100% or could it be 80%? Or
The answer is yes, and I don't know the exact threshold off the top of my head. I think it depends on what order homes sell. You know, you sell all the expensive ones first, you get there sooner.
do you think the expensive ones are going to sell first or the less expensive ones?
You know, it's a good question. We've gotten extraordinary demand. Everyone from an opera singer in Austria who's planning to move to Ann Arbor to people in Malibu who's saying, I want to move back. I'm from Michigan. So we're getting a lot of initial demand. There's nothing for sale yet. We're like Tesla. The houses aren't even designed yet, and yet people are coming to us.
I did a project.
Knock on wood, it stays that way when we actually offer them for sale.
I did a project about 20 years ago in downtown Detroit called the Canfield Lofts. If you know Detroit at all, it's right next to the Traffic Jam restaurant, which is a famous restaurant. And it was like 60 lofts, or maybe it was 38. I don't know, maybe it's a long time ago. But they were all, we put in geothermal, and they were all energy efficient. And they put the loops under the parking lot of the structure, and they range from like you said, 350 to like 1,800 square foot lofts that are, you know, where every space is completely filled and useful. It's not like you have a dining room that's never used more than twice a year. And the bills were incredibly low. We looked back after it was installed, they had good glass, and the bills, they were running like $35, $50 bills in the wintertime. for heating with geothermal.
Wow.
So it kind of reminds me a little of that. He was kind of breaking to do that, do a project of geothermal in downtown Detroit, right in the heart of the city, and do an energy efficient project nevertheless. It's kind of a cool thing. Every time I go to the traffic jam, and it gives me a nice feeling when I look at it.
Matt, are you looking at any solar technology that can be repurposed at the end of its life? Are you setting up any kind of agreements with your solar installers to do that? Is that even possible?
There are a number of companies who are starting to do that and look at the entire life cycle of it. And in fact, there's even, I forgot what it's called, but there's a standard in California now that's set up to kind of give a score to the closed loop of solar. So that's coming. Ideally, every bit of material will be harvested sustainably. They'll be reusable at the end of its life cycle. There won't be toxic materials, and so on. That is the goal.
John, are you seeing that at all out there? Requests and questions like, hey, what happens at the end of these? Do they, can somebody take these back, repurpose them, recycle them? Do I get a discount on my next set of solar? You know what I mean? Almost like, what do you think?
Yeah, I'm not hearing a lot about it for most solar. I know that there were some technologies that were based on what's it called? The material that used to be used in yellow paints and stuff. I can't remember that. There was a chemistry.
I know what you're talking
What's
about.
that?
I mean, I know what you're saying.
Anyways, that was kind of a dangerous chemical. So those companies sort of started with a life cycle goal, and they had a recycling program along with it. But the reason they did is because their materials were more harmful to the environment, whereas most of what we use is fairly benign. 30-year life cycle, things going in a lot. Most of it's the same. I'm very hopeful that there will be when people need to start recycling them. But one of the issues is there's not a big demand for recycling because the stuff lasts so long and it's so durable, and so it hasn't been around that long. So I had a question for. Go ahead.
Just last week there was a story. First Solar is actually taking old panels and recycling them into new panels. So they're reusing the same material to create new panels. So there's and
they're the ones I was talking about. They were the ones I was talking about that use the chemical that's not as benign. So they really needed to do that. I had a question for Matt about when you talk about collaboration, and a lot of times when you have a project like this, which is very, it's pretty different, and it requires collaboration. I'm thinking of like Living Building Challenge, having been involved in stuff like that. One of the issues of those projects were there was a lot of work for contractors that they weren't really used to because they were asking for this upfront collaboration and designs that were much more involved up front, like, well, what's the implications of doing this to the solar, and what's, whereas most of our businesses are based on just sort of, much more, not prepackaged, but not having all those meetings up front. And I'm wondering about your model that you use. Do you feel like looking at it, you were kind of leaning on people for sort of volunteer work for the collaboration, or was it all people that are involved in being paid? And
no, everybody's got to be paid, right? I mean, that's if we rely on volunteer work, it's not replicable.
Right.
Where the volunteer hours are coming in are for things like the education, like for helping to create the Living Community Challenge Master Plan. These things are things that are just outside the traditional scope of a developer. Yes, you're right. We have front-loaded a lot of costs. We spent way more on stormwater initially than a conventional developer would have. But that's a cost shift. It's not an added cost necessarily. So while there are things that are in a project like this that are going to be more expensive than others, there are cost savings as well. Some things are long-term costs. So this is really just this financial dance that you have to play. But at the end of the day, the spreadsheet's the same. You've got to, the numbers has to work out at the end. The exciting thing is that there's just more and more data coming out every single day, you know, from Rocky Mountain Institute and others, that it's cheaper to do this stuff. You saw the numbers that I had with solar. Yeah, we've got it's like, oh, you're going to spend tens of thousands of dollars more for batteries and storage and solar and all this other stuff and geothermal and heat pumps, and you're going to spend $1,000 more on your stove and your water heater. And it's like, but at the end of the day, you know, the mortgage is the same price, and the profit to us is the same that it could be for a conventional development. You know, it's a myth that this stuff has to be more expensive. We've crossed the threshold at this point. We're at the tipping point.
Brett, could I ask Louise a question? Louise, you had mentioned.
Brett, I'm sorry to interrupt you there, but Brett, I actually have to jump. I'm realizing it's 8:30 and I've got a hard out. But I just want to thank everybody for being on this. All of you guys, it's great to see you, and looking forward to more and more really good news in the next coming year. I think it's going to be an exciting year for everybody, and thanks to everybody that's on here. Please, everybody, stay in touch. LinkedIn, Twitter, Instagram. I've got a mailbox too.
Argus Farm Stop. See you at Argus Farm Stop.
All right.
Yeah.
See
you, Matt. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you, Matt. Thanks for your time. Appreciate it. Thanks for your time, Chris. So how do we go to the educational fair?
Oh, I'll send you the link in an email. Dave.
Okay.
By the way, David, I put you a picture of me with Tammy Wynette on your email.
Do you have a picture of you?
What?
Can you send it to me?
Yeah, I sent it to you on your email. I sent it to Brett also.
Okay. I do remember Tammy Wynette, just so you know, Larry.
And she's a famous lady. Anyway, Louise, I was curious, in your presentation, you had said that Michigan and Illinois were at 5% in 2014, if I remember. And today they're at Illinois is at 8% and Michigan is at 6%. And I'm thinking, if they've gone up 3% in 5 years, how are they going to get to 25% in the next 5 years?
Yeah, that's a fair question. So Illinois did have a renewable portfolio standard before FEJA, but it wasn't really working for lots of reasons that I don't quite know, and also nobody probably cares about. It had to do with RECs and things like that. So it wasn't working. So then we passed FEJA. Technically, we passed it in 2017, but it didn't kick in until 2018. So the first 2014 to 2019, only 2 of those years had a strong renewable portfolio standard. We are not quite on track, but now that there's a lot more money and a lot more attention and a lot more, there's a lot more implementers, there's a lot of workforce happening, and there's a lot of contracts going out. So I think this year was really the first year that they saw a lot of community solar, other kinds of solar happening. So it's a slow start, but they're going to have to pick up now. But I don't think that the past is necessarily a fair judge because we didn't have the same policies in place. But yeah, we are not on track yet. But
it just seemed like it's going to be an incredible stretch. I didn't ask about Michigan, just as you said, you're not a Michigan expert, but Michigan's even worse. We're supposed to go from 6% to 15% by next year.
But yeah, it's rough. 1 year is probably not enough. I think like 5 years you can ramp up pretty quick. You can really double every year at least, probably.
Luis, I know Elevate is working on some things where perhaps folks in income restrictions can access community solar or renewable energy credits to reduce their bills. What are you seeing with that? What opportunities are there out there?
I don't work as much in that, so I don't know the specifics. I think people are interested in it. I'm trying to remember if all the community solar credits happen this year. It's harder to do, I think, to figure it out, but people are certainly interested in it, and there are requirements for it in the law, so it's going to have to happen. But yeah, I don't know that much specifics about how it's all working. I think one thing that we've seen some of is this sort of like, in my mind, it's not exactly community solar the way we originally thought of it, but it's sort of like a multifamily developer or even a housing authority will sort of do their own community solar. So it's not like a developer doing solar that anybody could buy into, but it's also not just a multifamily person putting it on their building. It's kind of this hybrid where they own it and it's mostly targeted at their tenants, but it's still a community model because it might be, you know, off-site, or it might, you know, it's not necessarily tied to individual people. So Westside Housing in Kansas City has a model sort of like that. So I think that's a thing that I have seen more of.
I know it looks like Freeman had left, but Chris, I don't know if you've been hearing any more about movement on community solar being available here in Michigan. I know right now it's a very additional utilities.
That's not really an area that I've been too engaged with, but I don't know, John, have you seen a lot?
I know there was a guy that was on the board of GLREA that pushed it a lot, and they got through some, and it was, I know it was hard to do with within the DTE or consumers territory, so they focused on the municipal. There are a few municipal utilities. I think there was some up north that they did some community projects. Dave Konkle, K-O-N-K-L-E, is the name of the guy on the board that was really pushing it. And I don't know, maybe Larry knows something about it, but
Mark Clevey also was heavily involved in it, but at the time. But I did want to mention something about community geothermal. That's a brand new one. I got a call from DTE Gas, which is unusual because gas always hated geothermal because it replaced them. And now they're looking at, they don't want to add gas lines in rural areas. And they say they're experts in installing loops in the ground. I mean, a loop is the same material as the gas piping. And you got to run, David?
Yeah, I got to run. Thank you, Larry. Sorry.
Thank you.
Thank you, Louis. See you, Chris.
So DT is now looking at putting in looping and, you know, financing it or some kind of thing to make a community and for a whole subdivision of putting in the geothermal, which would have economies of scale and save the installing of gas lines. It might be cheaper to do that and put in geo than installing the gas lines, and again, part of the electrification. So I was really shocked. There were 10 people on the call, and one of them was a director of the company, and it's very preliminary. They told me, you know, it's not something that's going to happen tomorrow, but I thought that was pretty exciting, you know, to get into a community geothermal situation. I'd never heard of anything like that before, so I was very, and usually consumers follows. Whatever DTE does, consumers follows. They tend to.
Yeah, it seems that, you know, no matter what, these more rural areas where there's a lot of propane and it's just super expensive, and they've got to come up with some strategies. I know consumers, their strategy right now that we've been seeing out there, especially on the income restricted side, is really, you know, heat pump replacements. More on the air source side is because they're limited their funding in those areas. But something, you know, something has to be done, I think, just because it's so expensive to get that infrastructure out there, right?
Right, and you know, we'd love it to be, you know, obviously I'm being involved with Michigan Geothermal. I'd love it to be geothermal. Quite frankly, if it's air source, that's great too. If it's some other form, you know, that's great. I mean, whatever is best. My position is whatever is best for the customer. That's why fuel switching was always such a pain to me, that our Public Service Commission wouldn't allow fuel switching because they didn't want to antagonize the utility. But it was silly because on the east side, people go from consumers to DTE, and on the west side, they go from DTE to consumers. So it balanced out. And my position was, do what's best for the customer, not what's best, you know, because of the paperwork or because you don't want to antagonize the utility or play around. you know, do what's best for the customer. That's the most important thing. Everyone's got to win in these things.
John, what involvement is the solar industry involved in the, you know, fuel switching conversation? I mean, obviously with more electrification, that's more kilowatts you need to offset. So is there support there?
Well, this is more of a policy question, I guess, than the installer question, but I can tell you that as somebody that also used to be registered as a HVAC guy, I thought it was really strange that you couldn't do any switching. So, you know, the incentives were for, well, if it's gas, you have to put in gas. With electric, you put in electric, and there's no, so it was frustrating as a, you know, as an HVAC person that really wanted to switch over to gas or to electric in most cases. You know, the solar industry is, of course, going to support anything that increases the use of solar. So that's the short answer, I guess.
Yeah, fair enough. We're probably about into, you know, far into the conference now. I know there's a lot of things going on tonight, I suppose, that I just learned about. So I don't see any other specific questions coming in. So I think we can just, you know, wrap up and close up a little bit early tonight. And I just really want to, again, thank our planning partners. One of them you can see here on the screen, Larry with the Michigan Geothermal Energy Association. And then there's John Freeman with Great Lakes Renewable Energy Association, David Gard with the Michigan Energy Efficiency Contractors Association, and then Michael Clement with Architectural Resource, and Dave Dye, who just checked out, our Green Home Institute Board Vice President. Been meeting with them since I think February, almost 2 times a month, just to really put this together. And, you know, our hope is next year we're going to consider, probably start planning that sooner than later, to discuss doing another virtual conference, maybe doing something in person too, but having that conversation. So we hope to see you all again next year. We'll be getting the word out. We have recorded all these sessions, so they're going to be posted up to the Green Home Institute's YouTube channel and available for free to watch over the next week or so, so you can check those out. And then I also want to give a big thanks to our top tier sponsors, T-Stud, structurally insulated framing systems behind the walls, the Michigan Environment, Great Lakes and Energy Department for supporting us, DTE and Consumers, of course, and Enertech and Water Furnace. Thanks to them. Thanks to you all. So,
Right, does this mean I can sleep late tomorrow morning?
It means we can all sleep in on Friday for once. So thank you all. Have a good night. Stay safe out there. We want to see you all in person next year, so we got to beat this thing. Thank you so much. Goodbye.
Sounds good. Thanks for all your hard work, Brett.